to IESA and has been the anchor for all of these initiatives. So JC, thank you for all the support all this while, and welcome to this chat.
Thank you.
The next person we have Mohandas Pai. While I request Mr. Pai to switch on your video, unmute your audio, I'll introduce you.
I'm already there.
Yeah, it's my privilege and honor to welcome Mr. Mohandas Pai. He's a Padma Shri awardee and former CFO and board member at Infosys. He's also the co-founder of Akshay Patra, the world's largest midday meal program, works actively with the government and regulators on policy recommendations and guidelines. Mohan has served as the chairman of the board of SEBI, and is now the board member of the National Stock Exchange in India. He has helped start over 10 different funds in ventures, growth, and public markets. He also leads a private equity fund called Iron Capital, along with Manipal Group chairman, that invests in life science and education companies. A selection of the companies include Byju's, Council, Zoomcar, Your Story, and Licious. Privileged to host you, sir. Welcome.
Thank you.
And last but not the least, we also have the honor to host Sri Tejasvi Surya, who is the Member of Parliament, Bangalore South. Tejasvi, while you switch on your video and then unmute your audio. Okay. So Tejasvi will be joining us shortly in a minute, and maybe I'll come back and introduce him once he joins the fireside. But at this time, I'll let JC start this discussion, and then we'll get going.
Thanks, Naveen. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure whenever I have talked to Mr. Mohandas Pai and Mr. Tejasvi Surya. Always a thought-provoking conversation, and always, I've had one common thing is that always I get back the questions which are very difficult to answer. So both of them you would definitely challenge whenever you have had personal conversations with them. We got the introduction done, but let me tell you, how I see Mohandas Pai and Tejasvi Surya, and in that context we want to have today's conversation. I see both of them as very influential leaders, and more importantly, very strong believers in India's tech leadership and prowess that we are developing. And their influence does not span only in a small portion of the tech area, but they are making a big influence in the digitization agenda of India, and also the skills development within the country. So the expanse is very big. But let me tell you, I don't have a set of questions. I did not prepare the set of questions for Mr. Mohandas Pai and Tejasvi. What I did, but in the last 2 days, I called a lot of my industry friends and the friends who are not part of the industry, and told them that if you were sitting in the lounge with them, what are the questions you would have, for them. And so, sir, I'm going to be asking exactly those questions. Now, if they are stupid questions, it's not my fault. Right? If they are intelligent questions, then I have chosen the ones, all the ones from the stupid ones to make them intelligent, right? So that is, how I'm going to go. Do we have
JC? JC, may I interrupt you? I see Tejasvi has joined us here. Mr. Tejasvi, if you can unmute and confirm your audio, we can introduce you and get moving into the fireside chat.
Yes, very good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. If you can switch on your video while
I'll switch on my video as well.
We can't see you as of now on video. Some details that each one of you should know. Sri Tejasvi Surya is the Member of Parliament from Bangalore South constituency, having been elected to the 17th Lok Sabha at the age of just 28. A lawyer by training and profession, Surya has a deep interest in history, philosophy, science, and civilization studies. His lectures and articles on these issues are widely followed. As a parliamentarian, Tejasvi has taken up issues of regional and national importance, from demanding primacy of vernacular languages in central recruitment examinations to applicability of NRC throughout India, from reforms in electronics policy to safety of dams. Surya has been a strong voice for progressing reforms in Parliament. As a member of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Information Technology and Office of Profit, he also performs the important role of parliamentary oversight. As a member of the Joint Parliamentary Panel finalizing the draft of the Personal Data Protection Law for the country, Surya is firmly advocating India's data sovereignty and privacy of Indians as non-negotiables in the bill. Tejasvi represents a new generation of Indian political leaders who will lead India into the 21st century. An honor to host you here, Tejasvi. Welcome.
Thank you
Jesse,
so much. Thank
over
you. Good
to
evening.
you.
Yeah, welcome, Tejasvi. We just, got started, and I was just mentioning, how always it has been a great conversation with you and Mohandas whenever I've had a chance to talk to you. And I was always also saying that the questions I'm going to ask are not prepared by me. I've asked my friends and industry folks to ask questions which they would ask you if they would meet you in their personal capacity. So if they are stupid, don't blame me. If they are good, then I have to be the right ones. But one more thing before I start. I was thinking about both of you and see what are some of the parallels and differences that the leadership that I'm going to be talking today. And one thing that came to my mind, which I definitely want to share with the audience, I definitely see Mohandas, by you as an industry leader, people call you entrepreneur in some ways, educationist, and so on. But whatever from the industry you have, your thought leadership is more to how you always thinking about well-being of the people and the society and uplifting the country. So that is the combination I see in you. And from Tejasvi, you are a political leader, of course, but all the conversations people have had with you, and I can speak to it, and others have told me, but you come out as a CEO. You come out as an entrepreneur and an industry leader, right? So your actions are more towards that, because of the urgency that you show, the want to do and finish the activities that we started, and the entrepreneurship spirit that you want people to have. So that is the great combination and some of the common things that I see between both of you. Now, to start with, I'm still getting some questions, so I will be referring to my cell phone in between because people are sending some questions. But to start with, both of you, if you look at the ISA and the ISA's Vision Summit, the whole theme is how the electronics, the semiconductor can make big difference in the lives of 1.3 billion people that we see. But actually, I feel how it can make a life of the whole of the world and the people in the world. So I'll start with you, Mr. Mohandas. If you can give us a little bit of insights and the trends in the technology industry that have been happening and what you see in the next 4 or 5 years, and then we will set the context around that to begin.
Thank you very much, folks. Good to talk to you again. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I think the big trend we have seen post-COVID too is the fact that digitization has taken off immediately. Out of 7.7 billion people in the world, 5.5 billion have a mobile phone, nearly 5 billion are connected to the web, connected to the internet, and maybe 4.5 billion are on social media. And India, out of 1.38 billion people, about 1.2 billion mobile phones are there, 900 million are connected, about 687 million are connected to the web. And by the time we finish this calendar year, many more will be there. So we are in the age of digitization. And what are the COVID era shown? The COVID era has shown very clearly that we are doing most things in a life to the digital device. For example, we get our goods and services through e-commerce, we get our health to telemedicine, children have the education through e-education sitting at home, and we get entertainment to Hotstar and Netflix, and we are able to do business and payments to payment gateways on the phone and almost everything else. And here we are talking and having a great conference all using technology. So digitization has taken off. We are truly in the digital era. And Prime Minister Modi, I must compliment him again publicly that he had the foresight about 4 years ago to say that he wants to create a digital India. And his vision was very clear. What will unite all the people in this vast country, rich and poor, in villages, small towns, remote areas, everybody? What can unite them? The only thing that can unite them totally is a digital platform. So Digital India is about connecting everybody, and through connecting everybody to devices, making sure they have cheap data plans. And Jio has given us unbelievably cheap data plans. Everybody can get a data plan at low cost. We are a poor country. You can deliver goods and services to every single body, every single person. And because the innovation by volunteers in Bangalore through the India Stack, we had Aadhaar, 1.2 billion people. We had JAM, 400 million people had bank accounts. And we had UPI, 1.6 billion transactions are happening. You can send money from one account to another through a mobile in 30 seconds without paying a single penny of cost. And all this is happening because everybody, Prime Minister Modi made sure had a bank account. And because he had a bank account, in 6 years' time, he made sure 12 lakh crore of benefits are transferred to people. Can you believe that? 12 lakh crores. And India has saved 1.5 lakh crores of money which would have been wasted, eaten away by middlemen or the wrong class of people. And that money is paid by all of us. And this is happening remarkably. And I think, today, all across India, women are able to communicate, women are able to do everything. So we have become a digital country, and the poor and everybody else has got the benefits. And in COVID, when everything shut down, what did he do? He made sure first that 200 million women got DBT. They got it in the instant. 9.5 crores, 95 million farmers got 2,000 rupees, and 8.5 crore women got free gas stoves, free of cost, and about 80 crore people got free rations. And the ration card has become portable throughout the country. And all this was done in a jiffy. He announced payment to the farmers in Tumkur while he had come for some meeting, and the next day morning they got money in the bank account. Has it happened anywhere in the world? Nowhere else. And that is the vision of Digital India. He had the foresight. And they all created, this India Stack was created by volunteers from Bangalore. It's an amazing piece. Now in the times of COVID, we have the National Health Stack. Arogya Setu has got 150 million downloads. And they had 50 million downloads in, I think, 13 days. Pokemon with the world record with 19 days. And all that is come at almost no cost. And today, we know through Arogya Setu who's got COVID next to us, etc. So how do you govern a large country like this, where people are rich and poor, remote and all in villages? Amazing, this technology and state-of-the-art technology. So we are in the digital era. Digital era has improved the lives of people in this country, allowed government to deliver services, and we have the courts now working digitally. They're all hearing, including the Supreme Court. Children are getting education. Yes, there is a digital divide. We have to bridge the digital divide. Half the children in schools are not able to do that because they're poor. They don't have a device. And we have to do that. I'm sure in the next 2-3 years, we are going to do all that. And I think that's the way to go. Next is, we need to make sure that we are prepared for the age of the digital monopolies. Today, COVID has pointed out to us that companies like an Apple, companies like a Facebook, companies like a Google, and Twitter have become digital monopolies. They have all our data, and all the data that is there with them can do a psychometric profile of everybody. And I'm sure Surya, Tejasvi, who is on the committee, IT committee of Parliament, will be going into all these details. So our data and everything becomes very important. And we need protection from this digital divide, digital giants, because these digital monopolies can know what we are doing every single moment because they monitor. They can build AI algorithms to monitor you. They can send you data which they want you to see, not what you want to see. They can shut you off from business because everybody is doing business on a digital platform. And they become the biggest threat to individual freedom in this planet. So now the world requires something called the Universal Declaration of Digital Rights, to give digital rights to every citizen around the world. I think India needs a law. Our data has to be protected. India needs to have data sovereignty. There has to be data privacy. The Supreme Court has said is part of our fundamental rights. And we need to have data security. And data residency is required to keep the data here. That is a very big challenge that we have to face. Next is the advent of AI and machine learning. Now, AI algorithms can speed up many things that we thought were impossible. Facial recognition has gone to 99%. Voice recognition has gone to 98%. And we saw the device on TV whereby you speak in Japanese and the device speaks you back in Hindi. So all that is coming. And now, wherever you are all over the world, by just taking a glimpse of your face, people can track you. People know where you are. and that becomes a threat to our safety. So I think like we had the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1946, we need the Universal Declaration of Digital Rights globally to multilateral agreements all around the world to make sure the people of the world are safe and sound. And AI is going to change everything along with robotics. Manufacturing is gone robotics, everything is getting automated, robots are there, and robots are getting close to being human. For example, we saw in Boston Dynamics a robot do a backflip and land on the feet. Can you believe that? We saw a robot run as fast as the cheetah, 60 kilometers an hour. Can you believe that? Very soon they can compete in sports, compete in everything, and drive us out. I don't know when you're going to send a robot to parliament to represent us. We don't know. Maybe those things will happen. So how do you make sure the human-machine interface improves to the benefit of the human being? That is very important. And when automation takes over, robotics come over, AI comes over, how will the world be? How will the poorest of the poor manage in all this? What will the middle class do? What kind of jobs have to be there? We have to debate. We have to come out with policies because you can't stop the march of progress. And you are in the chip business, Jitendra, and you know that the chip capacity has gone up tremendously. Very soon we're going to have quantum computing. With quantum computing, we're going to break all the old security codes. Now the speed of processing will go up by multiple X, and that is going to change the way the world does. And lastly, we are seeing a global network come by, and the power of the network is so large that you're out of the network, you're out of the network. And now the world era was the global supply chain. Now there's a global digital network. Now who controls the network? Who sends the traffic? What about security? What about cyber security? These are all large challenges. So I just want to say that, digitization is the biggest driver of the human benefit in the world, and it's going to get bigger and bigger. Prime Minister Modi and India have done tremendously to connect all of us. We are very fortunate to have good leadership with the foresight to make things work. Because the biggest thing to happen in India was execution of policies, and the government has made sure they executed policies. In fact, I want to go on record to say no Prime Minister has done as much for the poor of this country in 5 years as Prime Minister Modi has done. The data there is very clear. And this is very important because in the digital era, the digital divide is the biggest threat to any society. Nobody should be left behind. And the digital policy of government will make sure, yes, many people are left behind, that will happen. Then the rise of the digital giants with enormous amount of power. Frankman has got $7.5 trillion or $33 trillion of value in America. Apple has reached $2 trillion. Now what do we do? How do you protect individual rights? AI, machine learning, robotics, how are they going to change the world? The world is exciting. And for all of you in IESA, you guys are at the forefront of everything else. You men and women are at the forefront of everything else. You are going to drive all this. You are the great stars who are going to make a future. So I think I'm very excited. And I think these are the things that are going to happen. And, we should work together to make the world a better place.
Yep. Hey, Mohan, very well said. And the data points, speak to themselves. I'll go to Tejasvi, Mohan. But before I go, there are a few questions coming in, so I will just get you those questions so that you can think about it. So, people, some few questions are coming in. They're saying, "Hey, this is great, story of digital revolution that is playing across the world. The countries that will take advantage of will be the beneficiaries of it. For India, I think we are still into the consumption of lot of these innovation, lot of the solutions, right? Although some progress has been made over the last 5 years or so, but what would you challenge the industry, and what would you tell the government? How we become a value addition society while taking advantage of the digital revolution, right?
I will. I'll answer that.
Keep that, and I'll just come to Tejasvi before I come back to you. Tejasvi, so I think what Mohan spoke about the digital revolution. The questions were, when I asked people on what Tejasvi can cover, and they said, can we get a little bit of a government viewpoint and how government looks at from technology perspective, and how they want to really keep this process of getting in the hands of every citizen so that the well-being of people can be uplifted in the coming years. So just little bit of a government side of it, how they view it and what we are doing about it.
Yeah, good evening, JC. Thank you so much. And it was a very encyclopedic introduction by Mohandas Pai. And he has, in fact, thoroughly covered, in fact, the answer to my question as well of what the government is doing. Because starting from UPIs to bank accounts to Ujjwala gas cylinders to One Nation, One Ration card. I think he has covered everything in that sweep. So just to reiterate what has been the commitment of our Prime Minister and the government the last 6 years, the government very clearly realizes, the Prime Minister very clearly realizes that digitization in governance, digitization in all walks of public life is absolutely critical for India's fast-paced progress. And the government is working very closely with private organizations, is working with volunteer groups like the ones that Mohandas Pai mentioned earlier, to create infrastructure so that strong governance mechanisms can be built on top of that infrastructure, which is going to help the country's billion people. So the whole Digital India mission has been towards making Indians digitally more savvy, giving them access to cheap, accessible and reliable data. Second, ensuring that India also becomes self-sustainable, Atmanirbhar in digitization and electronics manufacturing. And the ambitious dream that all of us have of ensuring a $1 trillion contribution to India's economy through our electronic manufacturing sector is also something that is very audacious and ambitious at the same time. Also, Mohandas ji was mentioning how telemedicine, how education is all going online. I would add to the long list that he mentioned by saying that perhaps India will be facing the first digital elections come Bihar elections in end of this year, because this time the biggest number of virtual rallies is going to happen due to using technology. We will also be fighting, also be organizing most of the Karyakarta Sammelans or volunteer programs through that. The Election Commission, I'm told, is already working along with Aadhaar of how to, even have remote voting facilities for digital voting facilities for senior citizens. Even that is a solution that is being worked out. So I think, even when it comes to elections, I think we are going to be setting a new benchmark for the rest of the world to follow. In addition to that, though belated, the government is very keen to give India a very robust personal data protection bill, as well as a proper legal framework for non-personal data. So there has been quite some progress that has taken on both these counts. The Joint Parliamentary Committee is meeting almost twice every week with stakeholders, industry experts, technologists, technocrats, everybody to understand the depths and scope of the data protection law. Because like Mohandas ji mentioned earlier, in the whole, in today's world of tech monopolies, digital monopolies, in the age of AI and ML, it is extremely important to have to protect an individual's right over his data. So the government is pushing towards a very robust personal data protection framework. At the same time, the country of 1 billion people must also realize that data can be a great national resource. So non-personal data can also give us great insights. We during the pandemic itself, we understood the availability of data or lack thereof can affect big public policy decisions in a grave manner. Take, for example, the crisis of migrant laborers. The fact that the government, both at the state level as well as the central level, did not have a strong and foolproof database of the migrant laborers, threw before us a very big challenge. Suppose the government had effective data on what are the migrant laborers, where are they from, which are the states in which they are mostly working in, what are the kind of skill sets they have, what is it that we can do to protect them, then the way we could have handled the migrant laborers crisis would have been much more effective. So pandemic has shown the importance of having public data, non-personal, anonymized data for public good. So I think the government is very keen in pushing that as well. So with that and the stress that has been laid on electronic manufacturing, all the numbers are already with you. I wouldn't want to repeat, but still I would want to say that, India is now the world's second largest manufacturer of mobile phones in just 6 years. In 2014, we had just 2 units manufacturing mobile phones, but today we have 260 such units. Whether it is the PLI scheme, whether it is these new schemes that are being more investment in this sector, is to ensure more factories come up, more electronic components are domestically manufactured, and India becomes truly Atmanirbhar in that sense. And it is heartening to note that for the first time in a very long time, India's import bills on semiconductors and electronic equipment has come down for the first time. And there has been a corresponding rise in the exports of electronic goods from India. So all of these put together and seen together is quite heartening. And in addition to this, there was one very interesting point that Mr. Pai mentioned in his address. How are we going to be addressing the challenge of the societal challenges that AI, ML, and Industry 4.0 is going to throw up? So because in the coming days, the jobs that we know today are going to be replaced by robotics. It's going to be replaced by artificial intelligence. It's going to be replaced by algorithms. So what are the kind of jobs for which we must be training our young people? So the national education policy has made some concerted thinking on that regard. So whether it is, vocational education today necessarily does not mean, skills only as a carpenter or as a photographer or as a plumber or anything like that. It also includes something as basic but still sophisticated as coding. So, whether it is coding from standard 6, or whether it is understanding the new computer languages, to understanding the kind of, to at least contemplating the kind of new jobs that are required, say 15 years from now, 20 years from now. The national education policy has made some a significant start in that direction. So in summation, I would want to say that the country is aware that the world is is progressively and rapidly moving towards digitization. And if India has to maintain the lead, there cannot be this artificial difference between government working and the private sector working. So it all has to come together. The UPI, the India's tax model, has shown that, from digital health cards to Aadhaar cards to digital voting, the country is looking at a holistic digitization process. And the fact that one Indian company has attracted investment from global competitors, whether it is Facebook, Microsoft, Google, all three competing giants investing in one Indian company, only goes to show that the opportunities for digitization of India is immense and has only begun. And I'm sure that IESA and other industry bodies like yourself have a very important role in that.
Yeah, thank you. I think very well said. And, your comment on big players coming and investing here, the shows in one of the companies, that what is the excitement we have, both from the market side of it and the potential that we have, within the country in the technology space. I will go back to Mr. Mohan, but, Tejasvi, one of the questions that is coming up is, that you can think about is, your interest in the science and civilization, studies, and now your role, as a parliamentarian and, a political leader. How do you see some of the human capital also getting, developed using technology, without technology, and your interest in these fields, if you can think about it and then, address that question that the person has. Mr. Mohan, I'll come back to the consumption versus value addition question. This is a pertinent question. We have had a lot of, voices on this. If you can, provide your thought leadership on this, and just tell us, what are we lacking? Why that value addition is not speeding up as much as we want? And it's not only in the software or hardware or any one specific electronics or semiconductor. In general, what do you think we need to do to speed that process?
JC, let me start by answering the question and taking stock of where we are today. Let's take software. Last year, we exported $150 billion of software, the largest in the world. We got more than 75,000 companies. We got 4.5 million people and $200 billion of IT in this country. That is massive. All right. That's very massive for any country in the world. And we have the United States has 6 billion people in software, 1 million are Indians. Out of 4.5 million here, 2 million work for American companies. Out of 8 million working for American companies, 3 million are Indians. 25% of Silicon Valley startup founders are Indian, 35% in cybersecurity. And if you look at the software service companies, in the most valuable list, among the top 10, 5 are Indian, top 5, 3 are Indian. Of the 2 million employees in the top 10, 1.5 million are Indians. This is enormous, okay? Now, we are at the service culture. What are we doing about innovation? Now, in innovation, we have the third largest startup system in the world, 45,000 startups who created $160 billion of value. And Tejasvi will be very happy. We got 40 unicorns. Just yesterday, PharmEasy became the 40th unicorn. All right. We have 750,000 people working there. And by 2025, we will have more than 100 unicorns, 3.25 million people, and 100,000 startups. Out of 45,000 startups, 10,000 startups have been funded. So the enormous amount of innovation taking place. We are 2 years behind the Silicon Valley in terms of innovation at the edge. And I'll explain what that means. In electronics manufacturing, like Tejasvi said, 250 million mobiles. You know, we are exporting mobiles of some $7-8 billion this year, 30% value addition because of policies. With the PLI, the value addition could go to maybe 40-45%. And the supply chain is coming to India. Some of the biggest manufacturers, assemblers of iPhones and others are coming here to create an ecosystem because that's an ecosystem play. Unless ecosystem is available, things are not going to work. Now, that is the status. What do we lack and what do we know? First, we need great platforms. Apple is a platform. Google is a platform. Now, Facebook is a platform. Twitter is a platform. Alibaba is a platform. And, Tencent is a platform. We need platforms. The only closed platform that is getting India is Jio. And why Jio? $30 billion, $50 billion have been spent in creating that telecom network. And now they're spending billions of dollars in getting all kinds of apps and everything else onto the network. They're creating an e-commerce platform. So India will be the battleground to see whether Amazon will win or Walmart will win or Jio will win. The only place in the world where there is great competition. All right. Even in the US, it is a two pony race between Walmart and Amazon. Here is going to be 3 pony. And that will determine who is going to win. And I will bet my money on Jio for a very important reason, because they got the telecom network. And the telecom network will drive value addition where everybody sits on top of the telecom network. I think that's extremely important. We need many more platforms. And what to do, I will come to that. Next is, we need to own our digital territory. Every world defends its physical territory. Every world should defend its digital territory. Our digital territory had been handed over to China on a platter. 60% of our digital territory was Chinese apps. Now the government has banned it. I'm very happy about that. I'm all for open markets, but China has created the great Chinese firewall. They don't allow you inside. Why should we allow them inside? And they came here, subsidized, and did everything, captured a market. We would have become a Chinese slave nation like Pakistan has become now physically, and we don't want to do that in the virtual world. In the physical world, we stood at the border to protect our country. In the virtual world, because of good government policies, what R.S. Prasad and Prime Minister Modi did, we got it back. And what has been the benefit? Many apps have come up in just 2 months. Mitro has got 33 million downloads. Chingara has got some 25 million downloads. They're going to grow. Snapchat or something has got some 150 million downloads. They're going to grow. So we're going to get back our digital territory. And that is very important for innovation to come by. And I think that's a great thing to do. So what do we require? We need to create more platforms. And platforms are a question of availability of digital space, which we have got now, and funding. We don't have enough funding. In the last 6 years in startups, they got $60 billion of funding. And this is important for you. We wanted to talk in parliament about this. Out of $60 billion, the Chinese put in $8 billion. Japan put in 10, $8 billion from SoftBank and $2 billion from others. And we put in only 6 because we have created a rent seekers economy where our capitalists seek rent. They want rokda, they want interest. They don't want to take a risk. And there's no capital. We invested $14 billion last year, $13 billion the year before. And money came in. China invests $65 billion a year, 60% Chinese capital. Ours is only 10%. America invests $135 billion. We need to create a funding mechanism by making sure large institutions like a LIC and the insurance companies, which have a balance sheet of 45 lakh crores. Our insurance companies have a balance sheet of 45 lakh crores. Yesterday, we had a talk with them. LIC has invested peanuts. They said you put money into funds, all real estate AIFs. They not put money into innovation. They're not investing. The Canadian pension fund has come here, put $30 billion into India. $30 billion. And what did the LIC put innovation? Peanuts. All peanuts. They're not doing it because of bad policies. Tejasvi must raise it in parliament and help us. So we need Indian institutional money to come in. We need the Indian capitalist class to invest to make platforms. One geo is not enough. We need more. So when 100 unicorns come, we want them to be owned by Indians. Out of 40 unicorns, 21 are headquartered outside India. The domicile outside India. Flipkart is an MNC owned by foreign capital with a subsidiary in India. Yes, they're an Indian company. We like Sachin and everybody, but they're all gone outside. And why should they go? Because they didn't get capital in India. RBI has got some very obsolete policies which harass people, and tax policies harass people. We've seen all the tax harassment, all this kind of angel tax and all that mess which is there, which government is trying to clean up. Government has been proactive, but you can't change the behavior of some people so easily. So we need to create platform. For platforms to require capital. Then what we also require is to promote innovation. Now look at your chip industry. India has got 250,000 chip designers and testers. 200,000 in India, in Bangalore alone, is the largest collection of chip designers and testers in the world. The only other place will be China or Taiwan. And we are competing. All the American companies are here. 265 companies are here in Bangalore. You know that, JC. You are the heart of it. All of you are the heart of it. But what do we require? We started from testing. We've gone to design. We're designing old chipsets and old, chip design sets and everything else. Now we need a Elevate program in Bangalore by which people can come and bid and get grants of 5 to 10 crores to create at least 10 new, chip design products a year. Because chip design products requires R&D. There's great risk. Now Elevate gives 50 lakhs for about 100 companies. We need 10 companies to be picked up, give them 5 to 10 crores every year. So every year 10 in open competition to create this great products in chip design. Then we also need to take it forward and start about what about creating a fab. Now, we don't have a fab. In fabless technologies, India is ahead. We don't have a fab. We need a fab for strategic reasons. And the government had a program for the last 10 years. They said we'll give money. We had many people coming from the US with no money who tried to come here and put up the plants with no money. It doesn't work. It's a capital intensive industry. Intel, I heard, looked at it but went away for whatever reason. Because what I'm told is no foreign company has confidence in India's ability to provide the infrastructure. When Taiwan set up TSMC, they made sure that there was good infrastructure, there was good water, power supply was there, everything was there. And they gave grants to TSMC. So Tejasvi, here is the proposal. Government should put BEL. BEL has got some 4,000 crores cash on the balance sheet. It's a defense PSU. They're in Bangalore, the best place for setting up a chip fab. They must pick up BEL, tell them to invest 2,000 crores. Government should give them another 3,000 crores of equity. It's the public sector, so you can give it on a nomination basis. You don't have to be scared of any private sector. And allow them to borrow another 5,000 crores. Put up a chip plant in Bangalore, in India. Now, it is going to be expensive. It doesn't have to be the latest technology. It can be 20 nanometers. I think there's one generation behind. That's fine. Now, what can they do? How can they get business? Here is an idea. They must focus on the defense sector because in defense, we don't want China designed chips. We don't know what is going to be there in embedded software. We don't want that. We want chipsets made in India with embedded software and security made by Indians for India. So defense can be a big sector. Next, smart meters. We got some 30 crore households, 300 million households, 300 million meters, maybe 400 million meters. Why can't we have a standard for a smart meter which uses a chip, and the chip can be built by Bell in India, and government can have regulations. And today we are getting Chinese chips for designing our smart meters. Why should we do that? We set the standards, we set the specification, and ask Bell to make it, and Bell can make it. It doesn't have to be, I think, 9 nano or 10 nano, whatever is the latest one, 7 nano, I think. It can be 20 nano. It is okay. And that can be very good with Wi-Fi. That can be done. Then for IoT devices, we're going to have drones and IoT devices all over, sensors all over the place. They can all be led to Indian standards, and India can set the standards. And then the third thing they can do is to make sure that we have a PLI scheme where government gives them incentive for every chip that they sell. And if we do that, the devices will take off. The smartphones will take off. Everything will take off in this country because we'll have chips. We don't have to have the leading chips. We can import it from outside, but at least one generation behind, we can have all the chips. And then the tape outs can be done here. There are many innovative companies in Bangalore who are doing chip design. For tape out, they go to TSMC or somewhere else. They can do tape outs here. So I think we need Bell. Private sector cannot do it. There's no point depending. Government should put in Bell, and Bell can do it. And our defense industry and everything should be there. That is a big idea. The next thing which is important is In human capital, JC, what do we need? We need more PhDs. India only produces 500 PhDs in computer science. The joke. We need to produce 5,000 PhDs. For PhDs, we need a large program, a 500 crore program a year, whereby you pick the top 50 good institutions, give them grants for more PhDs, give them grants for most master's program like the Tribal IT is doing in Bangalore or the Tribal IT in Hyderabad, so that we produce them, give them grants for research. We've been talking to Niti Aayog for an AI policy. I know you've been working on it, JC. And you and Niruti have been working on it. You people wrote the program, wrote the paper. It's fantastic. But they must put money behind it. Let's develop the PhD, because we need people at the top of the pyramid to do R&D and to get those PhDs, to write those beautiful algorithms which can change India. And we need investment at the top. So R&D and human capital and chips. And lastly, like I said, we need capital. Now, platforms, a chip factory in Bangalore. We need frontier investment in frontier technologies, which DST is trying to do, but they got to accelerate that. Just now, we got Umakant Soni, who's got a grant for an AI lab in Bangalore. Yes, you must talk to him and help him out, because he's going to work with the ISC. Bangalore should become the AI center of the world. Bangalore should become the ML center of the world. The human capital is here. Great companies like Intel, everybody is here. All the great people are watching this seminar. They can all do wonders along with others in Bangalore. In Tejasvi, in the last 1 year, 500 startups have come up in Bangalore who say they do AI. Every one of them does AI. Now, every kid in the block is doing AI. Whether doing or not, we don't know. At least they're talking about it. That means they're doing something. And that is fantastic. So we got to invest at the top. Get capital, platform, change the policy, get in smart meters for business, make chips, and do R&D and human capital. If we're able to do this and give grants liberally in Karnataka, please tell Dr. Ashwath Narayan to do this. I think Ramana Reddy was here. Ramana Reddy can at least do that, spend some 50 crores a year, which I'm sure is loose change for Karnataka, which got a budget of 250,000 crores this week. The Karnataka is the second richest country, second richest state in per capita income. If you overtake Telangana is here. So this is what is required, JC. And I think at the end of this seminar, we must write all this, go to Karnataka government and say, hey, we want to do this. And I'm sure with Tejasvi's support, Ramana's support, because Ramana Reddy is a fantastic IT secretary. I mean, we had the IT secretary from Telangana, great person, wonderful man. I worked with him very well. He's wonderful. I'm sure he'll take all these ideas, implement before we do it. So we got to fight him too. And we must get Ramana with Tejasvi, do all this. In the next 30 days, make the announcement. And Tejasvi, you must meet our Prime Minister and RS Prasad and say, why didn't you ask BL to do it? Because BL can then work with defense. That is most important. We don't want to be dominated by China in chip design. Our armed forces should have the best chips, the best state of the art, and they should use it, and it must be owned by Indians, delivered in Indians. I'm sure people like JC will support you in doing that. They got great talent, and Intel and all the people in the seminar are very trusted people.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mohan. What I had said in the beginning as an introduction, I think, I am proven right on that one, thought-provoking ideas. A couple of things, before Tejasvi, I come to you on the human capital, your interest in science and civilization. Two things. First, a lot of these good thoughts that are coming, I want to put the challenge on ISA and its leadership that let's take these ideas, let's build a framework on these ideas and take it to, if it has to be taken to the PMO and to the chief ministers of the states, and make it happen. In the next 30 days, I think the ISA leadership should take the challenge of coming back with what is the framework and what are some of these thoughts that we need to build up. And then second, I'm going to ask the ISA organizers, there are so many questions coming in. We want to extend this by 10 minutes. Mr. Mohan and Mr. Tejasvi, hope you guys are okay with that. There are a lot of good questions.
Sure.
Sure? Okay.
Sure.
Yes, Tejasvi, I'll come to you on,
yes.
JC, 1 minute. We are so fortunate to have a young MP. I think it's 28. So he's got a good 35, 40 years ahead. So all the dreams we talk about, he will implement it. There is the power of youth. The power of youth is the power to dream, to make it happen and change the future. Of course, many of us have worked. We're not exactly spring chickens now. We had a good time. We have built something to be proud of. But today we have a MP who can take it forward and make it happen with enormous energy, passion, and all the wonderful young people, if IECA can join with him. And we should make Bangalore the AI center of India. We should be among the top 2 chip design centers in the leading edge chips. We already must be there, but I think we must dominate. We must beat China.
Perfect. Very well
Well,
said. Go
JC,
ahead.
I must say that each time I hear Mr. Pai speak about, Bangalore and the vision that he has for the city with such passion, it's truly inspiring. And just the last 5 minutes, he's given all of us a charter of what to be done for the next,
Yeah.
a few decades. That's the kind of commitments and the ideas that he has already thrown. Uh, he has touched upon a lot of very important points again, when it comes to human capital and what the government is doing in that regard. I think one cannot stress enough the importance of innovation and research. If you look at any important country that is dominating the world markets today, whether it is Germany, United States, whether it is China, it's all because they created high value, PhDs in frontier technologies. So I think that is one thing that the National Education Policy, the new Policy 2020, recognizes. So there have been two very important steps that are taken in that regard. Whether it is inviting and permitting the top 100 universities of the world to come and set up campuses in India and to provide the same kind of education that they are providing in their international campuses, or whether it is the stress on the National Research Foundation, where we hope that the government as well as industry is going to come together and give a lot of encouraging grants and make sure that enough capital and enough scholarship money and grants are provided for new frontier research. Both these things are going to play a very vital role in the coming days in developing frontier technology and human capital that is capable of thought leadership in that field. Having said that, the other important thing that the government is also focusing on is the government is aware, like Mr. Pai mentioned earlier, that India has to do something on creating an indigenous fab system. So, whether it was the SPECS scheme, all of you in AESA might be aware that, the scheme for promotion of manufacturing of electronic components and semiconductors, where it proposed to give financial incentive of 25% on capital expenditure. It has now seen phenomenal interest from domestic as well as global electronic components manufacturing companies, and 62 applications are registered in less than 2 months. So I think there is a lot of positivity, a lot of interest that is being shown by industry, whether it is domestic or international, in trying to invest in India. And there is a lot of work to be done. And I think the Bangalore ecosystem that we keep speaking of, whether it is the technocrats, the entrepreneurs, the VCs, the PSUs in the city, I think all of us can actually give to the country a Bangalore manifesto, which can be some kind of a blueprint on how the country can view the blueprint for making itself a technological superpower in the coming days. And just on a side note, I have been reading this book in the last few days, JC. It's called Future Politics. It's written by this author called Jamie Siskind, in which he speaks about the importance of investing heavily in all of these emerging and sunrise sectors, and how governments have to take the lead. And so in that context, what Mr. Pai mentioned of BEL coming up with this project, and how LIC, and other financial institutions can be a very interesting, important role in investing in these new idea startups. I think both of these things are going to play a vital role. To sum it up with the question that you had asked about our interest in civilization, the one lesson that all of us can draw from our civilization is that India was technologically very superior and powerful. And that was one of our primary reasons for global dominance. So, we had great strength in spirituality. We had great rishis and munis who spoke about the afterlife and, about the great truths of life and death. But at the same time, we had great scientists in the country who were at the forefront of their fields of expertise. We had the best technologies for textile manufacturing. We had the best technology for weapon and defense manufacturing. So if you look at any of these important spheres, one thing that made India a very powerful civilization was our complete preeminence in technology. So when India went down technologically, India's decline started as a civilization as well. So that is the biggest lesson that those of us who have made a cursory study of civilization must understand, and that is something that we must correct now. So with the rise in our technological prowess, there is going to be a corresponding rise in our influence on the world. So, we have extremely capable young people, extremely capable young talent, which is capable of taking risk, which is capable of learning new things, which is capable of, investing in new ideas, and in a very audacious fashion go and get these things done. So all of these are the capabilities of the Indian youth, and I think we need a proper legal framework, policy framework, which will not hinder any of these abilities of the Indian youth. So with that, I think we will go a very long way in creating this kind of an ecosystem in India.
Great. Thanks. I'm conscious of time, but I will have last question for both of you, and it's a common one in some senses. I think it would be not fair of me if I just stick to the digitization and technology space. I think we are living in a unprecedented times. This is something very challenging. With COVID, never imagined this would be the life and the business. For us. So, I will ask a question. How has it changed for you, and what is some of the what do you want to tell some of the leaders on this conference today? As to some of the lessons that you have learned and what you see going forward. And Mr. Mohan, you can start with it. But added to that would be a question. Whoever has gone to your office, they would have one experience definitely before stepping out of that office. We would carry at least 4 or 5 books with us, on the way out, right? So, I would like to also add, what book you are reading and some messages from it. So, COVID, how your life has changed personally, and any leadership lessons, and a book you are reading. Tejasvi, you have already covered the book once, but the same question, I'll come back to you.
I would say that COVID has made all of us re-examine our life. What are we doing? What are the purpose of our life? How are we spending our lives? And for those of us who are past 50, past 60, we know that we got less to live than the years we've been by. So for us, every day we live is the one day less in our life. So we got to make the most of what is left in our life and be healthy. So the COVID has forced you to focus on your health and on your well-being, and to make sure that you change your food habits, you sleep properly, and take care of your health. And don't ignore your health. Because most of us in a hurry-burry, we always thought we can take care of health tomorrow, and tomorrow is not going to be far away. The second most important thing is re-examine what you're doing and why you're doing. There's so many things we did. For example, in 2019, I took 185 flights. 185 flights. In 2020, I said I'll cut it down by 20%. I still took 120 flights before everything shut down. Now I've not traveled for the last maybe 5 months, and I'm feeling very happy. And have I missed anything? Nothing. I've not missed anything. I'm talking to the same people, I'm meeting them. So cut down on travel, use more of technology, and make better use of your time. There are many meetings which are unnecessary, many things you do which are not necessary. Make better use of your time and make yourself much more productive. And the third thing, what you have to do is start writing. Because many of us have to put our writings down. I had a wonderful person help me, which Tejasvi knew, Nisha Hula. She's my daughter-in-law too, but a brilliant person. And she's a chemical engineer from Carnegie. And she and I have been writing on economics and everything else. It's been enjoyable because we are throwing out new ideas and becoming innovative. And the next thing is connect with your family, spend more time with your family. I spent more time with my wife in the house the last 5 months than I did in all of the 30 years after marriage. Let me tell you that, because I've been home. Well, for some, it may be very difficult because, you have to keep a distance with people very close to you. But fortunately for me, we have a big house. So I'm in one corner, she's in one corner. We meet very often whenever we want to meet. So there's enough room and time. I'm sure, Jesse, even for you, it is there. Otherwise, for a small house, you got a bit of a problem. You got to do that. And the last thing is catch up on your reading. So reorient your life, do things which are productive, make best use of your time, communicate with people, use technology, read, write, and make your life worthwhile. Now, my life is very different from Tejasvi's life. He's a young man with a great future. So it'll be interesting to see what he thinks and how COVID has helped him in his life. And the second question you asked about the book, I'm reading a book called The New Idea of India by Rajiv Mantri. Because today, the idea of India has been hijacked by the leftists in this country who try to force their view of the idea of India. To me, the idea of India is the idea given in a constitution by our founding fathers. Our founding fathers for 2.5 years debated the idea of India. They fought for freedom, all of them. They got together to write the constitution. They debated every single thing. Why do we have reservations for minorities under Article 2930? Why did we create a compassionate society? Why did they give the vote? They have debated every single thing. And the reasons and logic is there. And they gave us a great constitution. An idea of a country where everybody is equal, where there is justice, there is dignity of the individual, where everybody is protected. And the statement, be you ever so high, the law is above you. A country governed by the rule of law, where the country will invest in people left behind. Some people will get special breaks, and we have to accept that. And they created that country. That's the idea of India. Now, after 70 years, what is the new idea of India built on a constitution? So we have a clear definition. Rajiv Mantri and Harsh has written this book. It's a fantastic book. I would urge all of you to read it. And the second book is about Jinnah's Islam and Gandhi's Hinduism. I think it's a fantastic book by M.J. Akbar. M.J. Akbar is one of the greatest thought leaders in India. It's sad that somebody went after him and tried to hurt him, and he has to fight the case. But he's a great thinker. And this book, he has read that 100-volume book, Collected Works of Gandhi. You must invite him and talk to him. He's a brilliant intellectual. It's a fantastic book about the founding of this country. Because for so many of us in life, we are not beyond the partition and the founding of this country. We still have to solve some problems and learn how to live together. And that explains some of the contradictions in society. We are a very large country, 1.38 billion people, 1,600 languages, 29 states. Everybody is different. Everybody is the same. Everybody is an Indian, but everybody is something else. So I think to get everybody together and live, we call 200 million Muslims as minorities. No country calls 200 million people as minorities. We call them as minority. They're not a minority, but we live together. And like he said, it's the only country in the world where at 4:30 in the morning, the temple bell rings, 5 o'clock, the azan is sung, and 5:30, the Ayyappas start praying, and then we have the Gurudwara and the church bell at 6 o'clock. It's been happening for 1,000 years, and we're all living together. We fight sometimes, it's unfortunate, but we live together. No country in the world has lived together with so much of diversity. And I think it's important that we continue this. So that's the book I'm reading.
Okay. Thanks, Mohan. Tejas, we'll close with you. I think the next session is going to start soon, but I would definitely want people to know, what COVID, how you are coping with it, and some of your experiences. And in your office, you always, book you have already talked future politics, but you have the legislation white pages that you have. Which is the legislation topic you are reading right now, and what is it? So we'll close with that.
Well, yes. So I'll keep it as short as possible. Mr. Pai, went from philosophy to science to the secret of a happy life, all in 30 seconds. So, the COVID pandemic has truly made us reflect on the importance of family in these difficult times. I think that is something that has, especially for young people, all of us, when we were a few years earlier, when we were in 23, 24, just out of college, we all wanted to go out and be in, by ourselves, and, being with your parents and being with family so old and so old school and not so cool. But now, during pandemic, you realize the importance of staying together and the importance of family and, being with each other. So that's one very important value. The second thing is, the last 1 year as a member of parliament from Bangalore, most of my time had gone in attending events. Okay. So, whether it was inaugurating a conference or attending, a housewarming ceremony or naming ceremony of somebody, Satyanarayan Puja of some place, or, so, if you actually go through our calendar, you will wonder, is this actually the KRA of a member of parliament? But, honestly, you have no other choice, because people keep inviting you to this and you're answerable to your constituents. You have to be among your people if you're a Lok Sabha MP. So, you're attending Ganpati Pandals to, attending music programs. So, most of your time goes in that. The one good positive thing that has come, as a positive because of the pandemic is this complete restriction on the social and political and all of these kind of religious programs. So, that has given us a lot of time to do a lot of administrative work. So whether it is, involving ourselves in COVID relief, whether it is, bringing technology, we have started this platform called COVID Raksha, which is a WhatsApp-based, IVR-based platform where people can call and starting from booking a free COVID test to getting ambulances picking you up from your home to even having oxygen concentrator machines supplied to your doorstep. Everything is happening just on a WhatsApp bot based and an IVR based platform. So we could build these kind of products during the COVID time with a young tech group supported by a few entrepreneurs. Even ACT Foundation has given us 250 oxygen concentrator machines. So working with hospitals. And the other thing, like I mentioned earlier, is understanding as a young policymaker the importance of data in public policy. I think I can't stress that enough. So in the coming days, whether it is in the central government or is at the municipal level, the importance of having data for governance is something that the pandemic has taught. And the other thing that we have also realized, politically speaking, JC, is my party, the BJP, is perhaps the only political party in the country today which has galloped on this digital revolution that is happening in India in political party administration also. In the last 4 months during the pandemic, more than 500 digital rallies has taken place across the country. So whether it is in Nagaland, whether it is Andaman Nicobar, whether it is in Bangalore, to whichever part of the country, our party has shown how politics of the future is going to be digitally, digital based. So I think, these are primarily some of the very important learnings. And the papers that I have here, JC, is all, I just came back from attending the Joint Parliamentary Committee meeting on data protection law. And the more and more we think about the kind of nuances that have to be incorporated in the bill, the more you realize that you're opening a Pandora's box of tech-driven questions, tech-driven possibilities, which law is just having to catch up with today. So I have to make justice to this role. I have to read up and learn as much technology as possible, though I don't come from a technology trained background. So most of the reading is going on about law and technology. So this is what is keeping me busy these days.
Hey, thank you. I knew, you would have those white papers that you would be reading. Hey, thank you very much. I'm not wanting to end this session. We are getting so many other questions too, but I think I will wait. I will look for another opportunity to have a chat with you very soon, sometime. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure. This was a great display of young politician, acting, behaving like a CEO, and a CEO really thinking and investing in the well-being of the people and country. So thank you very much.
Like a political policy maker.
And a policy maker. Thank you very much. I will take it to the organizers to take over from here. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jesse. Very nice of you.
Thank you, Jesse, and Mr. Mohandas Pai and Mr. Tejasvi Surya. On behalf of the ISA team, I would like to at least take a quick seconds to thank for your time, appreciate your inputs, and we look forward to keep hearing for your inputs as well as guidance. Mr. Mohandas Pai, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Tejasvi Surya, thank you for taking time from your busy schedule. And Jesse, thank you for anchoring this session.
Thanks, Jesse.
Welcome. Pleasure.
Okay. With that,